The weather here over the last days in London has really been warm and really lovely. So last night we had a lovely evening meal outside on the patio with the sun going down and the moon coming up, and it was warm and lovely. It was like being in a Mediterranean country. And we were talking about language because the guy I was talking to was French. And we've got colleagues as well that are Spanish, but their English is very good, but their mother language, their mother tongue is not English. And we were talking about that, and I thought later how we could use that for our acting, for another understanding of what words are. You see, as actors, we say, what's the text? I've got my script. I've got to learn the lines. So you can see we use those words like text, script, lines. We may say I have to learn my words, and my God, I've got a lot of words, and I've got to use them. I've got to learn them. We don't actually, not very often, use the term language. Now, if our mother tongue is English and we're speaking in English, the script, the text is in the English language, of course, it would be. But let's say we have to play a character whose mother tongue was not English, say it was French. We begin to see that language has a different structure, a different pattern than English. For example, the French, when they speak English, you can hear the accent if it's very strong. For example, like the word lantern, we say lantern. You see in English there's a flow, there's this watery element, it's flowing. But all this, we don't distinguish the syllables turn, we say lantern, whereas the French would say lanterne. They break up the syllables. And that's just one example how the pattern, the structure. Then you've got the grammatical structure as well, like the Germans bring the verb to the end of the sentence, or they break the verb up, for example. So why is that so? What is the difference between a person who was born in France, whose mother tongue is French, or a German, or a Spanish person, or any character that you may be playing that is not English, whose mother tongue was not English? They may speak English, the language, very well. But how do you then, through the language itself, find the character? No, that's not right. Not find the character, but that character is different from you because your mother tongue was English. We immediately come to a number of things, and this has been talked about before by people who train actors in different accents and different dialects. They notice that the topography or the landscape of where you're from makes a great deal of difference. That's part of the cultural aspect of where you're from, which affects immediately the character. The character, number two, their inner soul life, and how they operate in the world with other people and with other objects as well in number three. So let's look at landscape, shall we? If the landscape is rather mountainous and not flat, then that's within the pattern of the language, the feeling of the language itself. That landscape, when you're born into it, affects you completely. Not only your DNA, you know, the family that you're connected to, the bloodline, you could say, the landscape itself is the environment has affected you. For example, I don't speak Swiss German. It's called Schweizerdeutsch or Schweizerdeutsch. And if I was to mimic it, it would be something like this. Can you see the up and downness within it? Like the high mountains and the valleys, it's there. Or take my own environment that I grew up in, which was Australia. There's no mountains. I mean, there are high things, but not very high, like in Europe. Everything is really quite flat and hot as well. It's not hot all the time. So you could say this flatness is there. So you get the flatness within the language itself and how I deal with the language. And notice everything comes back because I don't live out and express myself so much enthusiastically. Everything is flat. We see then the distinction between the vowel and the consonant. The vowel element being inner feelings. The consonantal element being about number 3 and what's happening in the outside world. For example, the pattern of rain falling on a pavement. Pitter-patter, 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 we would say. So it's all consonantal. I can't come up to you and give you one consonant and go, hi, touch you lovingly on your shoulder and go, k. However, I would certainly give you an embrace or see you to begin with and go, oh, that vowel element is about my inner feelings. The consonantal element is about the outside world. So you can see now how all these things can really help us within the art of acting. So we really begin to work artistically, just using one element, which is language. Not just text or script or lines or words, but language itself, and how the language informs us tremendously. So when we're playing a character that is not English or American or Australian or New Zealand, where the mother tongue is in English, how would we go about that? One element, one way of doing it, it's not the only way, one element would be the language, how their own mother tongue, we say, the words themselves, the language itself, would help us. So that's just one aspect of how the art of acting is not just any more about how do I create feelings, or what's my intention, what's the objective, what's the super objective. All important questions, by the way, but they must be translated. A new translation is needed so that those conceptual things come into a more imaginative, gesture-based way of working. So that was just one element that I began to think after that conversation last night of how we could apply that to the principles of acting.